Moving right along, we will now convene a panel of experts on various areas of internet development and policy. The panelists were presented with the results of a survey conducted by CIRA with Canadians about internet governance, and each of the panelists was invited based on their area of expertise. The theme for the panel is the opportunities and challenges of the internet in Canada. Each panelist will have approximately 7 minutes to speak, and following that, the panelists will discuss and debate the future of the internet in Canada. Finally, we've set aside about 10 to 15 minutes for questions or comments from you, and this will just be one of the many times throughout the day where we can take questions and comments. So if we don't hear from you this time around, hopefully we'll make sure that we have an opportunity to hear your voice throughout the day. I'll invite the panelists to come up at this time, and on the panel this morning we will hear from Michael Geist, a law professor at the University of Ottawa and Canada Research Chair in Internet and E-commerce Law. We'll also hear from Steve Anderson, the founder and executive director of openmedia.ca, so one of Marta's best friends. Captain Frederick Gaudreau from the Sûreté du Québec, and Jane Tallim, the co-executive director at the Media Awareness Network. First, we'll hear from Michael Geist. Dr. Geist is a law professor at the University of Ottawa, where he holds the Canada Research Chair in Internet and E-commerce Law. Dr. Geist is an internationally syndicated columnist on technology law issues with a regular column appearing in the Toronto Star, the Ottawa Citizen. Dr. Geist serves on many boards and is the recipient of many awards. In 2010, Managing Intellectual Property named him one of the 50 most influential people on intellectual property in the world, and Canadian Lawyer named one of the 25 most influential lawyers in Canada in 2011. So, a lawyer that we can all like. He's the author of a very popular blog at michaelgeist.ca. And with that, Michael.
Great. Well, thanks very much, and thanks to CIRA for the invitation to come and speak. I have to say I spent about 6 years on the CIRA board a number of years ago, and this sort of event, the opportunity for Canadians to come together and speak out and learn more about what's taking place and more about what they can do, is exactly what I envisioned and was frankly never able to achieve while I was on the board. So I'm really glad to see that it takes place now. With that introduction, I'd actually like to talk about the other Canadian Internet Forum. I think this is a great one, and I was unfortunately couldn't attend last year, but you know, all accounts it was terrific. But there is another Canadian Internet Forum that I think is increasingly important, if not the most important forum, when we're talking about the future internet in Canada. It's only a few blocks away. The House of Commons has become, from my perspective, the Canadian Internet Forum in recent weeks and months, and even over the last couple of years. And if we're to talk about the kinds of challenges and opportunities of the internet in Canada, I think it's the topic that we can't avoid. As many people in the room know, there's a whole series of pieces of legislation that are currently before the House, and Marta mentioned a number of them. Bill C-11, the Copyright Bill, Bill C-30, which is alternatively named the Protecting Children from Internet Predators Act, or what we used to call lawful access, and which is perhaps more accurately described as the Internet Surveillance Act. That, of course, has attracted an enormous amount of attention. There's the issue around spectrum, which is going to happen, we're told, any day now, in terms of the policy that the government will come out with for the next spectrum auction. There's, of course, that anti-spam legislation with regulations that I suppose will also come forward any day now. The updated regulations, that is. And then there is Bill C-12, the PIPEDA reform legislation that was introduced or reintroduced but seems to have stalled in the House. So there is a lot taking place in that Canadian Internet Forum, and in 7 minutes I don't have time to go through all of them, but I do want to focus on two in particular, because I think more than almost any other, they will define the opportunities and challenges of what the internet looks like in Canada in the many years to come. The choices we make now are going to have an enormous impact. The first, of course, is Bill C-30. And you can scarcely have looked at anything either online or offline from a media perspective in Canada over the last couple of weeks without running into Bill C-30. I think that's a very good thing. I think for people that have been talking about lawful access and concerned about what the government had in mind for years now, whether liberal or conservative governments. The fact that this has become a major political issue is very good news indeed. If you haven't been following, there's a lot of information, there is occasionally misinformation about the bill. There are, I think, three things that we need to focus on. The first, and this is probably the most discussed element of the bill, is the mandatory disclosure of subscriber information without a warrant, without court oversight. This, from my perspective, really blows a hole in one of the most fundamental privacy principles we have. That is that where there is a mandatory disclosure, and I emphasize mandatory, there needs to be court oversight. Recognize that the law already provides the ability for internet providers and others to disclose information without a court order as part of an investigation. They can do so on a voluntary basis, and according to documents obtained under the Access to Information Act, the RCMP obtained that information about 95% of the time back in 2010. We are just talking about the last 5%, the instances where an internet provider, a telecom company, or others is asked to provide certain information. They're not comfortable with providing that subscriber information, and so the response is come back with a warrant. That's a feature, not a bug of Canadian legislation, and it is absolutely essential that we retain it. So too, the move towards a huge amount of surveillance within the Canadian network. The prospect of requiring ISPs to install these surveillance technologies, even more, the government having the ability to insert its own technologies directly within the network is, from my perspective, hugely problematic. So too is all the unknowns that are within this legislation. So many things put off to regulation so that we don't know exactly what this framework will look like. The other big issue is copyright. And while there are many who want to just say that we ought to try to kill the bill, not only is that not going to happen, but there is a lot to like in the legislation. There are, I think, appropriate balanced rules with respect to liability for internet providers. There's provisions for user-generated content and fair dealing, which do a pretty good job of trying to strike the balance, and there's even reform of statutory damages, which I think is a very good thing. The problem is, from a bad perspective, from a negative perspective, is around the digital lock rules, the so-called anti-circumvention legislation, which in many respects trump much of the good that is already within the legislation and go far beyond what's required for Canada to meet its international obligations, or the obligations that would come from what's known as the WIPO Internet Treaties. Even worse are proposals that have been put forward by a number of lobby groups for what I think are best described as SOPA-style amendments. Amendments that they'd like to see put in the bill that are strikingly similar to the kinds of things that were discussed within SOPA. They include things like website blocking, as well as expanded liability for sites that could catch within that net, not just the so-called piracy sites, but a whole series of legitimate sites as well. And so the time when we are talking about what the future of the internet is going to look like in Canada, the opportunities and challenges, the time is now. I want to quickly conclude, very quickly apparently, by noting that this is the year that there is a lot of reason to take heart from this. As we heard, this is the year that the internet has fought back. Whether it's with SOPA, with literally millions of people speaking out, becoming engaged, and having the capability of changing those rules, or in Europe, the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement, where tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets so effectively that the ratification of that treaty has now been sent to the European Court of Justice and is effectively suspended. It is quite clear that the ability for the internet community to speak out and influence is taking place right now. When we take a look at Bill C-11, when we take a look at Bill C-30, I say to you, now it's our turn. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michael. Told you you'd like him. Next, we'll hear from Steve Anderson. Steve is the founder and the executive director of openmedia.ca. Open Media is an award-winning Canadian nonprofit organization working to advance and support an open and innovative communication system in Canada. OpenMedia.ca, best known for the Stop the Meter campaign, which involved participation from nearly 500,000 Canadians. Steve is also an open internet advocate, writer, and social media consultant. His writing has appeared in numerous local and national publications such as the Toronto Star, the Ottawa Citizen, the National Post, and Epoch Times. On a side note, OpenMedia.ca was one of the first ever winners of CIRA's .ca Impact Awards. Steve.
Thanks so much for having me, everyone at CIRA, and for that award. You notice award-winning organization, and that's the award. Yeah, I first want to establish a little bit of context. I think in Canada that there's consensus that we're falling behind on key internet metrics, primarily cost and speed. And I think there's also growing consensus that that's because we have a fundamentally broken telecom market in Canada, and that it needs to be restructured. And I think there's several ways that we can do that, and I'll try and talk about some of them, but I think it's really important that we first diagnose the actual problem and where we're actually at in this country. And in terms of the challenges that I see going forward, the two that Michael mentioned are definitely top of mind for me as well. I think lawful access is really critical, and at Open Media we built a coalition that includes a range of organizations and academics, and over 115,000 Canadians have signed a petition at stopspying.ca. And it, you know, I think if Industry Canada is getting a lot of correspondence, I think public safety and Victaves are also getting a lot of correspondence on these things. And I think they should be, because I think they made a mistake, and we've been speaking about this. I think people like Michael have been speaking about this for years. But since May, we've been sending letters and rallying and engaging Canadians on this issue, and they've turned a deaf ear, and really that's why people are getting so upset, because their voices are not being heard. And I think, you know, it fundamentally takes Canada in the wrong direction towards a more closed and expensive internet. And I'd also, you know, on C11, that's an issue that hits close to home to me, because a lot of people don't know that my initial background that got me into issues like net neutrality is that I was an online video producer, and I felt like this was taking away my craft, my ability to innovate and to learn and to just develop my own skills. And I see C11 really in a lot of the same ways, in that, you know, I learned my craft and got my first job really by remixing videos, making mashups that later led to, you know, really a really rewarding career in video production. And I see the digital locks and the way that will inhibit innovation and remixing and mashups and all that sort of thing as a real danger there. And I think we need to keep that in mind, and keep in mind the kind of personal stories and the way this affects Canadians personally. I also think that the spectrum auction coming up is a big challenge. I think there is a danger that it could be handed over, that the future of mobile communications, potentially the future of the internet, could be handed over to just 3 companies. And I think it's really critical that we get a strong set aside for independent providers. And again, we don't want the status quo in Canada. That's not enough. We need to actually enable more competition and choice. And that means that we need to go beyond just making sure they survive to actually enabling them to take more market share. And I would also say another issue that's top of mind for me is wholesale rates for independent ISPs in Canada. Because this is basically the foundation of our digital economy. The CRTC did recently set some rates, the rates for which independent providers access digital infrastructure and are thus able to compete. And the rates seem high, and not only that, they seem like they will be increasingly out of step with the actual cost of providing internet service. And it's really crucial that we get those rates set in a transparent way, and that we review them every year. And I think that's a fundamental point that we really need to, all of us, encourage the CRTC and our MPs to get involved there. But you know, I'm not all doom and gloom. I see a lot of opportunity. I think there's a lot of opportunity to have authentic competition in Canada, and I think that comes through us moving towards what's called functional separation. So separating out the retail from the wholesale businesses of big telecom companies, because right now the problem is there's really perverse market incentives. You have a company, a big incumbent telecom company providing internet access, then also providing access to the infrastructure required by their independent competitors. And that just doesn't really make sense when they obviously have an incentive to discourage their competitors from providing services. And so we need to fix that. And we see in the UK where they've moved towards this functional separation, or what I call authentic competition. We see that it works. It lowers prices. It creates better services. And I think that's the way that we need to go in Canada too. I also think that we have an opportunity to have a broadband plan in this country like many other countries have, so that we're not falling behind on speed anymore. And I think in particular, the spectrum auction and the billions of dollars that the government will generate through it is a huge opportunity for us to invest in broadband. The last auction got about $4.25 billion, and I think that, depending on how much money we get, let's even say that it's half that. Investing $2 billion in broadband in Canada is a huge opportunity, and I think really it's a responsibility. I think that's our digital endowment. It's selling a public resource, and that money belongs to us, and we need to make it very clear to Industry Canada and our MPs that should be invested back in our digital economy. It shouldn't be taken out to pay for a deficit or something like that. So in closing, I would say, let's not be indecisive or half-measured now. We definitely have more Canadians, as Michael was saying, engaged in this than we ever had before, and I think that it's key for us to continue. I think that's why we're starting to shift things. And I think we have successfully pushed back on meter billing. It looks like we're successfully pushing back on lawful access. And I really think that there's a huge opportunity for us to actually now be proactive in fixing our broken telecom market, in fixing our digital economy now. And I think events like this, thanks to CIRA, are really a really big part of that process, and I hope we can scale this up together going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Also speaking this morning is Captain Frederick Gaudreau. Frederick est le responsable de la division de l'intervention du service de la surveillance technologique au sein de la Sûreté du Québec. Il dirige notamment les activités de soutien aux enquêtes en matière de cybercriminalité et coordonne de multiples projets de développement en partenariat avec des organismes luttant contre la cybercriminalité. M. Gaudreau est représentant de la Sûreté du Québec sur plusieurs comités et groupes de travail, dont le groupe de travail fédéral, provincial et territorial sur la cybercriminalité, Francopol, the Society for Policing in Cyberspace, the National Cyber Forensic and Training Alliance et l'Association francophone des spécialistes en investigation numérique. Il a également représenté la Sûreté du Québec lors de plusieurs colloques et congrès au Québec, au Canada et à l'international. Bienvenue, Frédéric.
Bonjour, je vais faire ma présentation en français, donc s'il y a des gens qui doivent prendre les appareils, je vous invite à le faire. Donc j'ai déjà pris 30 secondes de mon précieux temps. D'abord, merci énormément à CIRA d'avoir permis à la Sûreté du Québec de présenter aujourd'hui un peu les perspectives et les différents défis qui, nous, pour les agences d'application de la loi principalement, représentent la réalité de l'Internet en 2012. Alors, la question sur la première diapositive que vous voyez ici, c'est policer le cyberespace. Est-ce que c'est possible? En 2012, je vous dirais que, évidemment, avec les présentations que vous allez voir aujourd'hui, c'est encore une question qu'on peut se poser au Québec, au Canada ou ailleurs à l'international. Comment faire pour policer le cyberespace et qu'est-ce que c'est faire la police dans le cyberespace? Est-ce que c'est au-delà de l'application? Ici, si on prend par exemple au Canada du code criminel, il y a également d'autres choses qui sont intéressantes ou importantes à réglementer. Maintenant, mon job à moi, finalement, en tant que policier, c'est vraiment d'appliquer le code criminel au sens canadien Et donc, je veux écarter ici les différentes possibilités, par exemple la protection des droits d'auteur ou la protection, en fait, tout le débat qui parle finalement de la propriété intellectuelle, évidemment. Par contre, en tant que Canadien, je suis très concerné par ce qui se passe présentement et maintenant, ça me fera un plaisir par la suite d'en discuter lors de notre panel. Alors, ici, on a une image qui vaut 1000 mots. Et si on peut prendre une comparaison avec ce qui est présenté ici, qui est un post Tandy, qui était en fait une publicité de 1989, donc il y a au-delà de 20 ans de ça, on vendait donc un ordinateur à un prix de 8 500 $. Évidemment, ça ne comprend pas l'écran et la souris. Si vous voyez ici, ça ne fonctionne pas, mais ça exclut l'écran et la souris. Donc, et aujourd'hui, on se retrouve avec des appareils de petit format qui permettent de faire des multiples fonctions et partout. L'ordinateur que vous voyez ici n'avait probablement pas de connexion à Internet. Hein, évidemment, en 89, c'était très limité. Maintenant, tout le monde peut être connecté à Internet. Et tout le monde va pouvoir éventuellement générer sa propre adresse IP avec l'avenue d'IPv6. Soit dit en passant, je tiens à souligner les efforts qui sont faits par CIRA pour la transition vers IPv6. Je dois précisément dire qu'ils sont des précurseurs et des leaders dans le domaine pour le passage à l'IPv6. C'est un défi de technologie ici, mais ce n'est pas vraiment le but de ma présentation, mais je tenais à le souligner. Alors, si on prend l'image encore ici qui est présente, je vous mets juste au défi de faire la distinction entre un ordinateur et un Tandy et un iPhone et prendre la même perspective pour la police. Est-ce que vous voyez une différence entre les autos de police qui étaient utilisées en 1989 et celles qui sont utilisées en 2012? Non, c'est encore des voitures avec 4 pneus, 4 roues et la même façon d'intervenir. Le défi qu'on a, nous, en tant que service de police, c'est s'adapter à l'évolution de notre clientèle, qui sont des citoyens, mais également à l'évolution des technologies. Il faut sortir finalement de ce paradigme-là de dire qu'on est dans des voitures de police et qu'on maintient encore la même façon d'intervenir. On se doit absolument d'évoluer et la situation actuelle en est une bonne démonstration. Définition de la cybercriminalité. Ici au Canada et ailleurs sur les différents comités avec les différentes personnes avec lesquelles j'échange, avec la communauté universitaire notamment, on ne s'entend toujours pas pour définir c'est quoi la cybercriminalité. La cybercriminalité, évidemment, ça n'existe pas ici. Hein. Dans le Code criminel canadien, il n'y a pas une infraction ou une section du Code qui prévoit la cybercriminalité. C'est une série d'infractions qui pointent vers un phénomène. Alors, il faut faire attention parfois lorsqu'il y a des études qui paraissent de par les compagnies de sécurité qui sont très pertinentes pour dire que la cybercriminalité est un phénomène à la hausse, etc. Il y a des préoccupations. C'est plutôt un buzzword qu'on utilise pour faire la promotion de mesures de sécurité. Alors moi, je prends toujours le recul de dire, attention, il n'y a pas de définition de cybercriminalité, c'est plutôt un phénomène, donc il faut le voir comme ça. Par contre, est-ce que le phénomène est en expansion? Alors la réponse est oui, et les raisons sont assez simples. Moi, je suis un promoteur de l'accès à l'Internet partout. Juste pour faire une petite parenthèse, mes parents demeurent en Abitibi. Ceux qui connaissent le Québec, c'est au nord-ouest donc de Montréal, à 6 heures de route à peu près de Montréal. Et jusqu'à tout dernièrement, ils n'avaient pas accès à Internet haute vitesse. Pourquoi? Parce que les fournisseurs ne se rendent pas sur place, donc ils devaient, encore une fois, commuter avec un Internet à 4 kS. Donc, laissez-moi vous dire que quand j'allais en vacances chez mes parents, je venais un peu mal, je tombais avec la fièvre parce que je n'étais pas capable de communiquer normalement. Je n'avais accès à aucun site Internet. Alors, dernièrement, ils ont dû défrayer des coûts pour avoir un accès satellite, étant le seul moyen pour avoir un accès Internet qui permet maintenant d'utiliser les différentes applications. Alors, ceci dit, chaque personne qui se connecte à Internet, pour nous, les services de police, ça devient une nouvelle victime potentielle. Donc, c'est pourquoi on peut dire que plus il y a de Canadiens qui sont connectés à Internet, plus il y a de victimes potentielles, plus il y a de suspects également potentiels, et donc on voit à ce moment-là une hausse de la cybercriminalité en tant que phénomène. Donc, c'est important de le préciser. Oui, effectivement, le phénomène est à la hausse. Ici, je pense que l'objectif du forum, c'est de vous permettre d'échanger sur nos préoccupations. Alors, je vous dis, en terminant, notre préoccupation principale, encore une fois, en 2012, pour les services de police, c'est de réussir à prévenir la victimisation, qu'elle soit sur la route ou qu'elle soit sur Internet. Et encore une fois, ça me fait plaisir d'échanger avec vous sur nos préoccupations et les différents challenges que l'on voit en matière de sécurité, mais également la préoccupation principale pour la police, qui est de prévenir que des citoyens soient victimes de cybercriminalité. Merci.
Merci, Frederick. Finally, we'll hear again this year from Jane Tallim, who's here to join us. A former English language arts teacher, Jane first joined Media Awareness Network, MNET, in 1995. As MNET's Director of Education, Jane developed many of its award-winning media education resources and programs on a wide range of media-related topics, including web literacy. She has promoted media education extensively through national and international speaking engagements, and we're happy to have her here again today. Jane?
Thank you, and I think I'm the diversity on the panel here, being the only non-dude. I was invited to talk here today about digital literacy, which was a mainstream in last year's CIF, as you know, and it was also top of mind in many of the discussion threads in leading up to this year's event. And in the white paper that CIRA produced last fall, it was actually cited, digital literacy, as being one of the main obstacles to people going onto the internet in their daily lives. We know that almost a third of people with broadband access actually choose not to go online. So the big question is why? If adoption and not just access is our goal in Canada, then we really need to support the development of the knowledge and skills that Canadians need to have confidence to go online, to understand these very complex issues that we're talking about here today. We know that becoming digitally literate, it's a lifelong process. It's not a stamp, unfortunately, that you can have and be done with. And it really varies depending on your stage in life and your circumstances. But all of the different competencies that come under digital literacy can be classified under three simple principles: use, understand, and create. Use ranges from just basic technical know-how, knowing how to use the technology, to a more sophisticated understanding of how to access and use knowledge resources, as well as emerging technologies. And we have to be really careful not to confuse use with knowledge and understanding. You could have a highly teched-out teen with superb ICT skills, and she may still trust everything she sees online. She may still post things she'll regret later. She may cut off the web for school projects and not give a thought to the privacy implications of what she's doing. And this is where understanding comes in. And understand is that crucial piece, and this is what we're really talking about today. It's the skill set that helps Canadians make informed choices when it comes to the internet, and it's central to responding to issues. Understanding is all about being able to comprehend, contextualize, and critically evaluate digital media. And it's the piece that's essential to safety and security, which is why we need to start teaching it as soon as kids start going online. The ability to create with digital media ensures that Canadians are active contributors to digital society. And creation, whether it's through blogs, tweets, wikis, or any of the hundreds of avenues for expression that are available online, it's at the heart of communication, collaboration, and innovation. But this very important component isn't necessarily being cultivated in our schools. Like, take Wikipedia, for example. Our research has found that rather than capitalizing on this amazing platforms, teachers have pretty well told students, don't go there, don't use it, because anyone can contribute to it. So instead of using Wikipedia as a stepping stone to explore the power of collective knowledge or to learn how to judge and assess information, we're instead cultivating a generation who don't see themselves as contributors, and even worse, aren't encouraged to question, thinking that knowledge is just a click away. All you need to do is find the website that has the right answer. I think we're all in agreement that digital literacy is essential, but despite best efforts, we're not really seeing much movement in Canada for a cohesive response to developing these skills. While government and industry are focused on supporting access and developing employment skills, there just doesn't seem to be any coordinated effort between government, industry, and education sectors to support digital literacy among the general public. We really appreciate the complexities in doing this, but does that mean we just throw up our hands and hope for the best? At the very least, leadership is needed to bring stakeholders to the table to assess what we're currently doing and figure out what still needs to be done. Research is central to this. While the CRTC and StatsCan collect basic data on broadband use and uptake, Canada would be well served with additional data collection on digital literacy levels to inform consumer education and protection programs by governments and other stakeholders. We know this is important because Media Awareness Network has been conducting ongoing research on children and youth and the internet since 2000 through our Young Canadians in a Wired World survey. Over the years, we've talked to over 12,000 kids of parents, and we're not just interested in what kids are doing with technologies. We've always been interested in exploring how this impacts their daily lives. Past findings from the 2 previous phases of our research have been used extensively in Canada, but finding money to continue the research is becoming more and more of a challenge. Last year, with funding from the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, we were able to start phase 3 with teacher interviews and focus groups with children, youth, and parents across the country. 2 weeks ago, we actually released a report on our teacher findings, and it's got much food for thought for the education sector that we're hoping to explore more in a national survey. The findings from our focus groups from parents and kids, which we'll be releasing later this spring, will lay the groundwork for a national survey of over 6,000 kids that we hope to do in 2013 if we can find the funding. We're still in the process of coding the data from the focus groups, but I thought I'd share with you some of the themes that are really relevant to what we're talking about today. It's been really interesting for us looking at how attitudes have evolved since 2000, both with parents and with kids. In 2004, when we last did this, parents were more concerned about how to manage Johnny on the home computer in the family room. Well, when we talked to parents last fall, you have parents whose kids have multiple access points to go online, and parents are very frustrated at how do I watch Johnny when he's online, when Johnny can be doing it anywhere through multiple platforms. A significant shift that we found for not all, but the majority of parents we talk to, is seeing the internet as a source of fear. And this sense of danger, whether it's justified or not, has made invading children's privacy an imperative of good parenting. We're also seeing a similar shift in youth. They've gone from really thinking of the internet as a private place where they can explore things away from adults to a place where they are constantly scrutinized by adults, whether it's parents, teachers, schools, or corporations. This fear, these barriers, this sort of disassociation is a dysfunction that we really do have to work on. And what kids tell us is they need help, but they need people to actually listen to and respect their lived lives online rather than talk at them from an adult perspective. And you know, I loved Michael's line that it's our turn. If it is going to be our turn, then we really do have to work together to build the skills that we feel we're part of the conversation and that we have the confidence to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you to all of our panelists. And now we're going to open the floor to hear from you. There are microphone runners on the floor. Where are you? Okay. And if you would like to ask a question, if you would just please raise your hand, and one of the runners will bring you a microphone. Please keep your questions relatively short so that it's our intent to answer as many questions as possible and to hear from as many people as possible. I also ask that when you ask a question that you identify yourself just to give us a little bit of context. Please note that we are also going to be taking questions online. I can see them come up here on the webcast in real time, and once in a while we'll take the questions online as well with you here. Everything's being continuous as a part of the webcast. So with that, could I have your questions? Je vous invite à poser vos questions en français si vous voulez. Je vais les traduire pour our panelists si nécessaire. And there we go. We have one right there. Can we have a microphone in that corner?
Can you hear me? Okay.
There we go.
Chris Ewing with Envision Online. Question to Jane. Thank you very much for your comments. You covered a lot of information. However, the question I have to you in regards to digital literacy, do you consider best practices guidelines as part of the beginnings of how people understand and use the internet?
Yes, I do. In fact, it's really good that you brought that up, because we do recognize it's a challenge, but an advantage for Canada is there's tremendous precedent in other countries around the world that have created digital literacy as being central to their national strategies for the digital economy. So you have countries like the UK and Australia and the EU that have done considerable research and developed all sorts of approaches. We actually have the advantage now where we can sit back and see what works and craft our response using the precedent that exists internationally.
Over here on the left. Right beside you, there you go.
Good morning. My name is Marita Mall. I'm just off a plane from Vancouver, where I spent 3 days at a community networking conference where there were representatives of people from across Canada who are doing learning, community networking learning in their communities. A lot of this is an outcropping of the Community Access Program that Industry Canada instituted in 1994. But at this particular meeting, a group brought forward a book of 40 wonderful stories called The Road We Traveled, Our Community's Voyage to the Future on the ICT Highway. And these are stories of communities from Nunavut to the Atlantic provinces that have done amazing work in teaching and learning and developing projects, cultural projects, information and education projects. So I've got this here, a few copies. If anybody wants to see me about that, I'm happy to share. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that comment and for being willing to share. Any other questions or comments for our panelists? Okay, I have one question from the internet right now, from Rod. What is the panel's opinion on the data caps usage rate for broadband in Canada? And do you think the current offerings are hindering Canadian business online? Would one of the panelists like to comment on that?
Sure.
Steve?
Yeah, comment on that. I think it's definitely hindering businesses online. And I've personally heard from a number of people, in particular video producers, online video producers, who are saying, you know, the prices are going up, and that makes a huge difference on my bottom line. I'm thinking of moving to the U.S. and moving my business to the U.S. So it has a huge impact, and I mean, I think we've, for now, safeguarded the independence from having to impose usage-based billing for a limited period of time, but that's not going to last very long, and there's still not enough competition and choice in the marketplace for some of the major incumbents to get rid of the caps. So it's a huge problem, and as I was saying, we do need to fix this market.
Thank you. Any other comments from the panelists?
Well, sure. I'd note that, you know, I think if that question had been asked a year ago, it would have been easy to be very pessimistic about things, although, of course, that was at the height of when Open Media's campaign and the broader public campaign on this issue had begun to take hold. I actually came away from the CRTC decision on this to move from usage-based billing to capacity-based billing. You know, I thought I was fairly optimistic about that decision. And frankly, seeing that some of the appeals have come from some of the incumbent providers, I think that suggests that they're somewhat concerned with what the CRTC has done, particularly, I suppose, on the pricing side. But I think it's instructive to see how there is the capability on that issue, but I think on others, for the Canadian public to influence where some of this policy is going. I mean, it was quite amazing to see the former chair of the CRTC, Conrad von Finkenstein, acknowledge when he was leaving that this was an issue that the CRTC had gotten wrong, and that the driver behind helping move it towards getting it right, or at least getting it less wrong, was the public itself. And I think in some ways it serves as a model that I hope can be replicated in a number of other areas.
Thank you. Any other questions from the room? And again, in back right-hand corner.
Hello. Yes, one question that occurred to me was Michael's comment, in relation to Michael's comment about the other internet forum going on the Hill. How do you people on the panel see these two fora interacting?
Michael? Wow. Well, you know, the glass half full would be that we have a government that's really, you know, interested and keen on these issues and recognize that when you get hundreds of people physically in a room, and I'm sure many, many more online, there is enormous Canadian interest and concern with many of these issues, and that it would seek to ensure that the kind of feedback that's generated out of these sort of events gets plugged into the policy process. Glass half empty position would be that I've come to call the government's digital economy strategy as the Penske file, because they're working really hard on that file. But we've got a minister, at least for now, with all respect at industry, that doesn't seem to have prioritized this issue nearly the extent that the Prime Minister, Tony Clement, did. And so it's great to suggest that we've got last mover advantage on issues like digital literacy because everyone else has done it. But I have to say that there's a fundamental problem when on issue after issue after issue, what we see happening is no movement at all. There's a piece in the Hill Times this week, as mentioned by Byron earlier, that talks about why the government got the C-30 lawful access wrong. And it notes that on their general crime agenda, it's an us versus them sort of proposition, us being the good guys and them being the bad guys. What they got wrong on C-30 was that the them is us. We're the internet users who are going to be surveilled. And I don't know that they still get that the them is us on many, many of these issues.
Any other comment? Thank you, Michael. I have a question online, and I'd invite our online participants to also keep your questions short so that I can read them on one screen. On and this is from Kevin, on cybersecurity, how will Canada respond better to critical infrastructure protection in the future? In other words, protection of industrial processes from Stuxnet virus-type cyber espionage, from spear phishing attacks like those seen on critical security firms. Let me say, from spear phishing attacks like those seen on critical security firms. Frederick?
Yes, I can jump on that one. I think there's two things that we have to see here. There's the real life and the movies. And for me, it's really important to make this difference. Actually, I can say that on a Canadian perspective and provincial also perspective, we are looking at those issues because it's really important for us to make sure that all the critical infrastructures are safe, okay? Even if it's physical or internet related. But unless, yes, there's lots of attacks going on every day since the internet exists. People are trying to, get into a structure, and sometimes it's like a challenge that they are taking to try it. But in fact, I think that yes, we should take a close look to it, but with a regard, like you say, we have to make the difference between what's going on in the real life and the movies. And I just want to say that we are really preoccupied by this phenomenon, actually, but we have to stay, really, how can I say that, transparent in our approach.
Any other questions, comments from the room? Right here in the center, please. Give a couple. Up a bit towards me. Raise your hand again. There we go. Okay, good.
Hi, I'm Ryan Briggs. Professor Geist mentioned one of the major concerns with C-30 is the mandatory installation of real-time monitoring equipment. And just last week, there was a detailed story in the Ottawa Citizen about Nortel being compromised for over 10 years by foreign hackers. However, law enforcement requires new tools to protect Canadians from cybercrime. I'm just wondering how the panel thinks that a balance can be struck.
Michael?
Sure, I can start. I think it's unfortunate that that this issue has become as divisive as it has over the last couple of weeks, and quite frankly, I blame the public safety minister's comments before the bill was even introduced for that. I have to say that in many of the media appearances I've done and discussions I've had, particularly with law enforcement, the notion that somehow it's us versus them, that it's the Canadian public against law enforcement, is enormously problematic, because it clearly isn't. I think we're both on the same side. And from my perspective, there must be room for compromise on a number of these issues. And actually, I've been blogging fairly extensively about what some of those compromises might be. To give you one example, not on the equipment side, although I would start on the equipment side, I would say that frankly, it makes no sense to me to give the power to the government to install equipment on network provider systems without necessarily even disclosing what that is. I mean, to me, that's just out of bounds. But on the issue that has really become one of the focal points of this discussion around mandatory disclosure of personal information without a warrant, I start by saying, it's a non-starter. There needs to be court oversight. But what I think when you take a look at the evidence to date is that that there may be, in some instances, a challenge with the current warrant system. It may be that there is the occasional situation where it takes too long to get a warrant, or it's too difficult to get a warrant based on the kind of information that's at play. That's a warrant problem. That's not a situation where what we need to do is throw out the principle of court oversight. What we need to do is identify how can we establish a warrant for this specific, very narrow form of information that retains court oversight and meets law enforcement needs for quick access to that same information. It seems to me that this is eminently doable and doesn't require the sort of more draconian approach that I would suggest we see in Bill C-30.
Any other comments, Frederick?
I'm going to do it in French.
Allez-y.
Je pense que M. Geist touche un point. Moi, en fait, de ma perspective d'agent d'application de la loi, je ne vois aucun conflit entre les approches. Je pense qu'effectivement, place au débat face à un nouveau projet de loi comme celui-ci. Par contre, ce que je peux mentionner, c'est qu'effectivement, dans les observations qui ont été faites par les gens, c'est avez-vous de la preuve que sans mandat, on est incapable d'obtenir d'informations? C'est-à-dire, même avec un mandat, on est parfois incapable d'obtenir l'information. Et également sur l'aspect technique qui peut être installé chez les différents fournisseurs d'accès Internet. Moi, je pense qu'effectivement, il y a des cas où on ne peut pas nécessairement dévoiler publiquement, mais il y a des cas qui touchent parfois la sécurité immédiate des gens, ou la sécurité ou l'intégrité sexuelle d'une personne peut être mise en danger. Et lorsqu'on va cogner à des portes de certains fournisseurs d'accès Internet de plus petite échelle, ils n'ont pas la technologie qui leur permet de retenir l'information qui nous permettrait éventuellement de localiser une personne. Alors, je pense qu'il y a un aspect, il y a une balance qui est importante à préciser ici. Il y a le côté où on a besoin parfois d'avoir accès à l'information pour une raison de sécurité, mais il y a également le fait qu'en aucun temps, les policiers veulent s'introduire dans la vie privée d'une personne sans être légalement autorisés. Et je pense que là, il y a un balancier qu'il faut peut-être ramener avec certaines discussions, effectivement. Par contre, il y a effectivement des cas où on a zéro information lorsqu'on va chercher chez les fournisseurs d'accès Internet. Et ici, je n'aimerais pas aucun fournisseur d'accès Internet en particulier. Par contre, je peux vous mentionner que c'est des fournisseurs à plus petite échelle qui n'ont pas nécessairement les budgets pour avoir l'équipement nécessaire pour avoir cette information-là. Et je respecte ça. Et j'espère que dans les discussions législatives qui ont eu lieu, qui seront considérées à l'effet qu'ils n'ont pas nécessairement la capacité d'acquérir ces systèmes de stockage-là. Et j'ose espérer que ça va être fait. Et en quelque part, je veux juste mentionner encore une fois qu'en aucun temps, en fait, les agences d'application de la loi désirent avoir accès à la vie privée d'une personne simplement en se présentant quelque part puis en ayant accès à l'information. Je vous dirais même que ça relance un débat qu'on tente de faire. Je vous parlais de prévention tout à l'heure. En 2012, actuellement, il est plus facile de trouver de l'information sur une personne, de l'information privée sur une personne en faisant Google qu'en allant dans nos banques de données policières. C'est là. En 2012, c'est comme ça. Et malheureusement, les gens, et on tente de le dire toujours, faites attention. Ce que vous ne feriez pas dans la vraie vie, dans la rue, donc prendre une photo de vous avec vos coordonnées, mettre ça sur un poteau de téléphone. Si vous pensez que c'est inacceptable de faire ça dans la rue, mais faites-le pas sur Internet. Et je pense qu'à la base, nous, en tant qu'agence d'application de la loi, si on veut prévenir le crime, on doit aviser les gens, faites-le pas si vous ne voulez pas que vos informations personnelles se retrouvent dans les mains de n'importe qui. Alors, c'est un peu l'espèce de débat qu'on a présentement, c'est le balancier est difficile à établir, et je suis entièrement d'accord, pour terminer, que moi, je ne vois aucun obstacle à ce qu'il y ait un débat ou une discussion et que les gens puissent amener finalement leur vision par rapport à ça. Je pense qu'on a le bonheur d'être dans une société démocratique au Canada, alors restons-y.
Okay, thank you. So, in case you missed the joke, certainly a few points there, and I'm not sure we're getting French to English translation. So, Frederick was mentioning how important it is to continue an open debate in a democratic society on these issues, and importance of understanding that before we can achieve a balance, we also have to consider the particular circumstances of the smallest ISP. And the interesting point that it's easier to get private information on an individual by Googling them than by checking a police database. And so that was interesting. And I believe we have another person waiting for a question.
My name is Ashton Chengara, and my question is for Professor Geist and for Jane Tallim. And it deals with the future rather than the present in some ways. With the Drummond report out, which is cutting down on many things, especially courses at universities and so on, my question is, do you see, like somebody says that internet could deliver courses to 50,000 people in their homes, and which would cut out a lot in cost and so on. And of course, many of the first year and second year courses are already being delivered in large classes. How far do you see this going, Professor Geist and Jane? Thank you.
Thank you. Jane, you want to start?
Sure. I'm sorry, I had a little trouble hearing you with the mic, but if I understand correctly, you're asking about the use of the internet to facilitate courses?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's already. I think it's a wonderful boon for a number of reasons. The fact that you can now get whole degrees online and it can be facilitated that way, as opposed to if you're in a different end of the country, there's issues to you being able to attend university. We're also seeing it at the secondary level as well, where you'll have some high school courses that are offered as well online. I think that there is a real place for it, and I think it's important, but I also think it doesn't replace the whole discussion and the blending of people in person and in our education system. And I think at post-secondary in particular, there has to be that balance, because with all of the webcasting and all of the technical tools that we have to try and make this type of education as engaging as possible, I think we really do also have to try and have that blend where we're integrating the technology to enhance learning and also having opportunities for people to connect and debate and discuss in person as well.
Thank you. Michael, comment?
Yeah, well, I gotta say, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So when you do law and policy, everything looks like a law and policy question. And I have to say, this is one as well. I think that we're certainly moving in that direction, but let's recognize that many of the issues that we've talked about on the panel are going to directly impact the prospect of moving towards distance-based learning opportunities. And so some of the issues that Steve was dealing with around caps and the like, I mean, it's hard to think of an issue that's more important to ensuring that someone in remote communities and otherwise has access to those opportunities, than ensure not only that they've got access to high-speed networks, but they've also got it in a way that they're not throttling back the services where some of that's being delivered, potentially using P2P or video streaming and the like. And so having an internet that can support that is absolutely essential. Having copyright reform that can support the opportunities that come from these sorts of issues, whether by using what's known as open educational resources or open access, is absolutely essential. And Bill C-30 purports to, rather Bill C-11, sorry, purports to deal with some of that, but there's some real problematic provisions there as well. the so-called book burning clause that's been much discussed. A provision that says it's all about trying to better foster distance-based learning, but at the same time what it says is that you take advantage of that particular provision. 30 days after the course concludes, you have to destroy the notes that are associated with that. And as a prof that may recycle some materials from time to time, the idea, wow, newsflash, the idea that you'd have to destroy those sorts of materials at the end of a course makes no sense, much less the very idea of courses ending, coming to an end, and then that's the end of the semester. I mean, part of the whole point of shifting towards these sorts of opportunities for lifelong learning purposes, for retraining purposes, for a range of different things, is that we're not stuck with the same traditional semester-type courses that we've had for so long. And what the government has done is, in this case, is say that they're all about trying to foster and facilitate that, but unfortunately, quite frankly, they've done a really lousy job of it.
Thank you. Just before I come back to another question from the room, I have one online. It's in French, so I'll translate it right after. Vous êtes tous des spécialistes, mais que pouvez-vous faire pour informer et engager le grand public, outre peut-être participer dans des campagnes comme celle de Open Media? It's from Ginette, and I think this might be for any of you, but it says, you are all specialists, but what can we do to inform and engage the general public as a whole? For example, encouraging participation in campaigns such as Open Media. Do you want to start, Steve?
Sure. Well, I mean, a lot of people don't necessarily see it this way, but I look at our petitions as really pedagogical tools. They're like an entry point for a discussion. And so one of the things that people can do is take that, go into your community, take the flyers, take the petition, and explain the issue to your friends and family and other people in the broader community. Get them to sign the petition, get them on the website, and then take the discussion from there. And I think that's the best thing to do. But hosting events, hosting screenings of unlawful access, for example, which is a documentary that was produced out of the U of T from Andrew Clement, which you can get on the website at openmedia.ca/screening. Just anything you can do to engage your family and friends, because that's really what has worked thus far, is us at Open Media providing a simple, easy tool for people to connect both with government, but also to reach out through social media and in their communities with their friends and family. And so I think that's the key, is to take it on ourselves. And that's really why this stuff is starting to change, is, you know, it's not really about Open Media or necessarily what we're doing on the panel. It's really that Canadians are taking these tools and reaching out, and then you know, each one of us is like a broadcaster now and has that kind of power. So I think that's essential, and I think that's what will change them.
Jane?
If I can add to that, I totally agree with what you said, Steve, and I think it has to start young. The trouble is, we kind of magically think that by post-secondary, all of a sudden this will happen. We have to start cultivating this kind of thinking and these opportunities when kids are in elementary school and secondary school as well. One comment we had from the teachers we interviewed, which I found really interesting, was many of them wanted less restrictive filters in school, as opposed to having restrictive filters and policies, because they're finding it difficult to guide their students in authentic ways. And authentic ways is getting involved in online petitions or visiting websites and looking at the information that's there that currently students are not allowed to do. So I think that's one, we have to really empower our educators to help guide kids in authentic experiences.
Comments? And we had a question, there's one here, one right at the front. And take one more question at the back, and then that'll be it for this time. But we're going to come back with more opportunities for this dialogue.
Hi, this is for Jane. I'm Kim from Technic Social. And this actually touches on your last answer. How much of this problem of digital illiteracy really is more one of a lack of thinking in our school system, and how much can we really be expected to tackle in a forum like this? Isn't this beyond the scope of the forum? And I agree with the less restrictive filters. Do you think that would help? And how much can our educators really affect change if what we're tackling is the technical issue?
I think it really is important to all of us here at this forum and Canadians in general. And I think we have such a complicated structure in Canada with our education system. There are so many layers that it's really difficult to have that sort of national vision. I do agree with you, though. I think we do have to cultivate critical thinking. Whether you're talking media literacy or digital literacy, all of this stuff at its heart comes down to thinking critically about our media lives, to thinking about the bigger issues. And that isn't something that happens right away. So we really do have to look at training our teachers so that they feel confident to use technology in classrooms in meaningful ways, to give them the guidelines they need, and to work with the educators at the policy level in school boards as well to facilitate this and come up with a cohesive approach.
And the gentleman standing at the back.
Hi, my name's Frank Krasuski. This
A
isn't
little louder,
exactly a well-formulated question, but we're at an internet forum here, and the words Facebook and Google haven't come up yet. What I'm wondering is, how do you see oversight of these very, very large and powerful corporations evolving in the future? Facebook has been estimated at having over 800 million users, and may rival, would be comparable to the third largest country in the world. So I think that's an open question for the panel.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to start? Michael?
Yeah, I'd start by noting, I agree with you. I think that, that there is certainly an issue there. If we had been holding this for 10 years ago, we would have been talking about things like carnivore and total information awareness, the sort of vision that government, especially in the United States, was going to build these massive databases and know everything about you. And it turns out those things were built. They were just built by us, fostered and facilitated by companies like Facebook and Google. That said, I actually do think we do have laws in place that I think are in a position to address some of those concerns. In the case of Facebook, for example, the clinic that we have at the University of Ottawa filed one of the first major complaints against Facebook on some of its privacy policies and started to effect change in that area. And frankly, we've seen the Federal Privacy Commissioner incredibly active with respect to Google, including publishing a public letter on their changes to privacy policies just last week. I must admit, I'd like to see them more vocal on lawful access at this point in time, as much as they're focusing on some of Google. I think there are laws in place, and what it takes is vigilance on the part of those that apply those laws to ensure that the various organizations like Facebook and Google play by the rules. I must admit, I'm more troubled by, let's say, a Privacy Act, which is the law that governs what government can do with personal information, that hasn't been updated literally in decades. And so we've got government saying that they're going to hold the private sector, like Google and Facebook, to a standard that they don't even hold themselves to, much less the way political parties are using our personal information, as we've seen just over the last couple of days with the controversy over the robocalling, where the personal information collected by all the political parties falls through the cracks and is subject neither to PIPEDA on the private sector side nor the Privacy Act on the government side. So I agree that it's a concern, but I actually think that in some ways we've got a lot of balls in the air. There's a lot of issues to be dealing with.
And with that, I'd like to thank all of you for bringing up your first set of questions and comments on our panelist session this morning. There'll be many other opportunities throughout the day to hear your voices. And of course, thank you very much to the panel